Hello, my name's Mrs. Tyler, and today we're doing some GCSE biology revision where we're going to make our own knowledge organiser looking at the menstrual cycle and the control of fertility. It's going to look something a bit like this. Lots of information thinking about the hormones of the pituitary gland and the ovary. So it gets quite complicated, so do pause the video. Let's get started. All right, so today we're doing about the menstrual cycle and fertility. And like I said at the beginning, this topic is for dual award and triple award biology. Just get rid of that bit. Today then, we're going to divide our paper across the middle in half lengthways. And I'm going to divide it into about a third here and a third there. And this one into about another third again. So we've got 5 sections, 1, 2, 3 that big and 1 twice the size. Let's just remind ourselves then of where the hormones come from for the menstrual cycle. So we're going to be looking at the hormones, the organs they're secreted from. We're going to be looking at the menstrual cycle. We're going to be looking at contraception in these 3. So we're going to be looking at barrier methods, hormonal methods, and other ways we can control fertility. So I'm going to start with hormones then. The 2 sets of hormones that control the menstrual cycle are released from 2 separate places. One of them is released from the pituitary gland, which, if we remember, hangs down from the base of the brain. And the other one is secreted from the ovary. So we're just going to remind ourselves of the female reproductive system by drawing two fallopian tubes with wiggly ends on. I'm going to bring that round down to there. That is going to form the uterus. And then lastly, got the entrance and exit to the uterus, the vagina. The uterus, remember, has got wide, thick muscular walls to push that baby out. And there's a small opening to the uterus called the cervix. So that gap there is called the cervix. And this is the uterine lining. We'll be talking a bit about that later. This is the uterus, the space where the baby grows. And here, looks like it's holding 2 rugby balls, are the ovaries. This is the pituitary. Right, so we've got basically 2 sets of hormones working between the pituitary and the ovary, and from the ovary back to the pituitary. Okay, so we've got a feedback loop between the 2. Remember that hormones are chemicals that travel in the blood. So the pituitary secretes 2 hormones, follicle stimulating hormone and shortened to FSH, thankfully, and luteinizing hormone. LH for short. And the ovary secretes two types of hormone, estrogen and progesterone. So we have an interaction between hormones from the pituitary that travel in the blood down to the ovary. They affect the ovary releases hormones in effect, goes back and affects the pituitary releases a different hormone that affects the ovary, and vice versa. So they're connected by the blood. On to the menstrual cycle then. The menstrual cycle happens towards the end of puberty. Puberty, remember, is when sex hormones cause secondary sexual characteristics. In men, one of those hormones is testosterone. And in women, one of those hormones is estrogen. The menstrual cycle then is when we use some of these hormones to control the release of an egg and maintaining the uterine lining in females. So it's the hormonal control of the release of an egg and maintaining a uterine lining. So we usually represent this as a graph, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. So I'm going to draw a y-axis, and then I'm going to draw a long straight x-axis like that. So this is a nice long thin graph. At the bottom is going to be time. We're going to measure it in days. This is going to be day 1. This is going to be day 14. And this is going to be day 28 at the end. So 4 weeks long. Up the side then on this graph, we're going to represent the thickness of the uterine lining. By uterine lining, I mean this thick muscular wall gets an extra layer of blood and tissue on it to help feed the baby in case it's going to develop. We always start then the menstrual cycle with the first day of the period. So day 1 is when the uterus lining is at its thickest and it falls away over a period of about 5 days. Okay, so between days 1 and day 5, the uterus lining gets smaller. So this is menstruation. We could call it stage 1. Stage 1 is menstruation, the posh word for having a period. And it's when the uterine wall breaks down and passes out. So that's at the start. Look at that, I've spelled that wrong. Stage 1. During stage 1, then, the hormone that's secreted is follicle-stimulating hormone from the pituitary. And as the name suggests, follicle-stimulating hormone stimulates a follicle to be growing in the ovary. All right then. So once all the old uterine lining has come away, then the body begins rebuilding it back up again for a new thick one, and that hopefully will maintain at maximum thickness for the rest of the period. Okay, sorry, not for the rest of the period, for the rest of the month. Okay. So in stage 2, estrogen is secreted from the ovary, and estrogen causes the uterine lining to thicken. Stage 3 then is ovulation. Ovulation is when an egg is released from the ovary. So if we were to draw it on here, it would burst out and it would pass along the fallopian tube back into the uterus. So that is ovulation. So let's draw an egg. Pop, out it comes. Ovulation usually happens around about day 14. It's controlled by the hormone, luteinizing hormone. Once ovulation has happened then, the ovary produces the hormone progesterone, and that's stage 4. So stage 4 is for the rest of these 2 weeks. And that is when progesterone is secreted. And that's job, progesterone, is to keep this uterine lining nice and thick. Okay. Eventually, though, the progesterone will stop being released by the ovary, and when it does, the level falls, and as it falls, the uterine lining comes away, the woman has a period, and the cycle starts again. Okay. So stage 1 is menstruation. Stage 2 is when the uterus prepares for a baby or a fetus. Day 14 is ovulation, and stage 4 is the uterus stays thick. Uterine lining stays thick in case a baby needs to implant and grow a placenta, in case a fetus. So if a woman does get pregnant, then the sperm will fertilise that egg, and that egg will make its way along the fallopian tube, stick to the lining of the uterus, and start to develop into a fetus. If it does that, then the placenta makes progesterone, and so the uterus lining stays thick until the baby comes out. Okay, so if a woman becomes pregnant, the fetus makes progesterone. Contraception then is when we make choices to reduce fertility or to reduce an egg being fertilised. And they can come in 3 different ways. The first way we're going to think about then is a barrier method. And a barrier method physically stops the sperm from reaching the egg. The best example of a barrier method is a condom. Another example, although nowhere near as effective, is a diaphragm. which is like a little rubber cap that goes over the cervix in the woman. If in an exam you are going to talk about using a condom because it protects from STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, or sexually transmitted infections, then say use a condom. Don't say use protection, okay? Because protection could mean like a helmet and a sword, all right? That's not going to do you much good to stop you getting pregnant. So if you're going to say that you need to use a condom to reduce the risk of STIs, then use the word condom. Reduces the risk of sexually transmitted infections. So, for example, HIV, which is one of the examples of virus that we need, and gonorrhea. It's a bacteria that you can get sexually. So condoms are probably the most important method because they stop the sperm reaching the egg, but they also protect you from sexually transmitted infections. However, we can reduce fertility by using hormones. Hormonal methods do not protect you from STIs. Do not protect from STIs. Probably one of the most common hormonal methods you've heard about are the oral pill or the contraceptive pill. And this is a tablet taken every day. They often contain estrogen and progesterone. And these prevent the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone from being released. So they stop an egg maturing or being released. There are, however, other hormonal methods, which are slower release methods and becoming increasingly common because with the oral pill, you have to remember to take it every day. And if you're sick and throw it up, then it won't work. Even if you get diarrhea, it won't work. And so they're slightly less reliable. So slower release methods are becoming increasingly popular. And these are hormonal patch, not so common anymore, obviously because they can come off, be removed. They last up to a week. Second one is having an implant in your arm, which looks a bit like a lollipop stick, plastic rod that releases the hormone slowly. They last for up to 3 years. So releases hormone slowly over 3 years, up to 3 years. You can also have the estrogen and progesterone injected. They last about 3 months. And the last type you can have is called an IUD, an intrauterine device. It would have used to have been called the coil. Basically, it's a plastic strip that's fitted up and sits in the cervix, so up inside at the top of the vagina. Sits in the cervix. And they are very long lasting, up to 5 years. So all the hormonal methods work by combinations of hormones that stop the egg being maturing or being released. The problem is if you stop taking the hormone, then the egg can start maturing and you can have ovulation and therefore get pregnant. So the pill, you have to remember to take it every day, which is the problem. You can have a hormonal patch. The problem is that can come off. You can have an implant, which lasts 3 years. You can have an injection, which lasts 3 months. Or you can have an IUD fitted, and that can last for up to 5 years. Draw here where the IUD sits. So we're just going to draw out the reproductive system again. So here we've got our 2 fallopian tubes with the feathered ends. They look like hands. Here we've got the 2 ovaries. Here we've got the bottom of the uterus with a thick uterine wall there. And that is the cervix. So the intrauterine device sits here. It has 2 little arms that ping out to stop it coming out. And they release hormones slowly into the blood through there. So that's the cervix. And that is the IUD. And the advantage of both the implant and the IUD is that you can't remove them. They're there. You can't forget to take them. It doesn't matter how ill you are. They're there and they'll prevent you from getting pregnant. There are, however, other ways we can prevent pregnancy. One of the ways we can do it is by sterilisation. And this is a minor surgical operation whereby fallopian tubes or the sperm duct is cut and then tied off. So in women, you can have your tubes tied, so they put a band around there, tying it tight, and that means that the egg can't get through down to there, so it can't get fertilised. You can also simply abstain from having sex. So that means not having sex. And there are other methods where you think about the timing of having sex and you avoid having sex around ovulation. This, however, is a very, very unreliable method of contraception. So it's unreliable. So that's it. The end of the menstrual cycle and controlling fertility. As always, your job now is to learn this, so you need to do read, cover, recite. So the pituitary makes FSH and LH, the ovary makes estrogen and progesterone. You cover it up and say it to yourself. The pituitary makes FSH and LH, the ovary makes estrogen and progesterone. This has got a lot of detail on it. So again, you might want to practice, draw this out again a bit bigger and go through what happens. So FSH first when you're on a period, estrogen second. FSH first when you're on a period, estrogen second. Right, go through and copy it out. Well done. Keep an eye out in the links below for any videos on testing your knowledge. And I'll see you next time.